This is a new thing. Little weird. I've been building to this for probably about 16, 17 years.
Hi, I'm Dr. Alex Lloyd, and I wanted to share with you today, very briefly, the number one cause of all physical disease and health problems. All right? And if you haven't, watch the number one cause of all health problems and watch the number one cause of all mental and emotional health problems, and then the one where I tie all of these together, okay? But this will be pretty brief, and I've never taught this in public. I've never seen anyone else teach it in public. In fact, most medical doctors I know do not know this. My training is psychology and natural medicine. I don't know any psychologist that knows this. So hopefully, if you understand this and then apply it to your life, you'll be ahead of the game. And hopefully, it'll be a game changer in your life. So let's take a look. The number one cause of all physical health problems and disease. This center green circle is a cell. You've got trillions of them. This is one, all right? And there's several things about this cell you need to understand. It is built to cooperate with other cells and the brain and what you want to do in your life. It's built to reproduce. It's built to consume energy and nutrients and stay healthy. It's built to get rid of toxins so that it can stay healthy. And it's built to not ever manifest a disease gene, okay? Ever, all right? So when we manifest a disease gene, it's a malfunction every time. And like most malfunctions, you can fix it, okay? And I'm going to give you the intervention at the end of this. I'm going to give you an intervention for free that we've been using with people for about 25 years all over the world that will help you fix the number one cause of all physical disease and health problems. Okay. And by the way, this is not intended to treat, cure, diagnose any health problem. This is working on underlying spiritual issues. That's where I'm coming from, all right? That's the most important thing to me. And a lot of people would disagree with that. And by the way, this is not about the spiritual, the cause of all physical disease. Well, in a way it is, but in a way it's not. So I'm not going to be going on that tangent if you're concerned about that. So let's get going. So the green thing is a cell. Virtually any cell in your body. And that cell has several things. It has a gate here that can bring in nutrition, that can bring in energy, that can bring in ions that help it become a healthy cell instead of an unhealthy cell, all right? And that gate is supposed to remain open and there be no reason for it to close. And the reason for it to close would be danger, all right? So that's your cell, and I could talk about this for hours, but I'm going to try to keep it very brief, very simple. That cell has a thing in it called a mitochondria that I've abbreviated with MIT. And this little squiggly line is the mitochondria. It looks kind of like a squiggly finger, all right? And the mitochondria is kind of your Delco generator. 100 years ago, every farm had a Delco generator. Some of them didn't have very good electricity, or it went down all the time. They were out in the country, and things were not as developed out in the country, especially 100 years ago. So every one of them would have a Delco generator and gasoline that they could power their home, things they needed to farm, okay, if the electricity wasn't working or if they needed electricity out somewhere where they didn't have electricity. And that Delco generator was like the power plant of their farm and house that they needed for everything to stay working and good and prosperous, okay? And it's the same with the cell. As the mitochondria goes, the cell goes. And the mitochondria has little tails on it, little hair-like tails. And you can literally get tested, and they can test your telomeres, which are the hairs on the bottom of the mitochondria, and tell you your biological age as opposed to your chronological age, okay? Which is really cool. You can be way older than your chronological age. You could also be way younger than your chronological age. And your biological age can decrease. Your chronological age cannot. Okay, so literally we can tell how old you are by the telomeres in your cells. The longer the better. Okay, and here's how it works. That cell has access to a couple of hard drives. One is your genes, your DNA, all right? And this cell has access to your DNA and your genes. So if there are disease genes in there, and there are, your cells have access to those disease genes that could manifest under certain circumstances. And I'll explain what that is in a minute. The other hard drive the cell has access to are all of your memories. Okay? Years ago, in doing brain and memory research, they cut out every part of the brain, and the memories were still there. And then transplants came along, heart transplants, lung transplants, etc. And people, not everybody, but a significant percentage of people, after the transplant, they had food cravings, personality changes, and all sorts of stuff from the donor that they had never experienced in their life. One I saw, and I've read a lot of these, and you can Google and find a whole bunch of them, was a gentleman who was very steady, very detailed, very predictable, very routine, you know, mild-mannered, soft-spoken, kind of introverted, has a transplant, and then after the transplant, and after healing, goes out and buys a motorcycle, leather jacket, starts talking in ways no one had ever seen him talk, cursing some, using some rough language. They became much more aggressive. One of my favorite ones is he'd been a very health-conscious eater before the transplant. After the transplant, his favorite food was Kentucky Fried Chicken. And he had never liked Kentucky Fried Chicken, and even said you shouldn't eat it because it's so terrible for you. And now he craves Kentucky Fried Chicken. Well, why is that? Because the cells that were transplanted, even though it wasn't a brain transplant, there's no such thing as a brain transplant, where most of our memories, we think, are. So it wasn't their brain that was transplanted. It was another organ. It was cells from around their body. But those cells have access to the hard drive of your memories and the memories of the donor in that case. Okay? And this cell will activate certain memories or feelings, thoughts, emotions related to memories at certain times and in certain situations. But it has access to all memories, all DNA and genes. All right? As the mitochondria goes, the cell goes. If the mitochondria is wiggling and producing energy by the wiggling the way it's supposed to, the cell will stay healthy, it will grow, it will reproduce, it will do the job it's supposed to do. The gate will stay open. It will bring in nutrients, get rid of waste, etc. Everything's great. In fact, the research says if the cell stays that way, with the gate open and the mitochondria producing energy the way it should, that cell could literally live forever. You probably heard we have a whole different body, like every 7 years, some parts faster than other. But if they did this, the research says that cell might live forever and never die. Okay? Now, we've not seen anyone do that, but theoretically, it's possible. So what makes the mitochondria wiggle and have the energy it's supposed to? Glad you asked. Okay, these wiggly lines, and I'm the worst drawer there's ever been, and that's not a joke. My wife's an artist, and opposites attract. So these lines are arteries, blood vessels, capillaries carrying blood. Some of them may be lymphatic, carrying away waste and things like that. And they're around the cell, but the blood or the blood plasma, which is also a liquid, they're supposed to stay in these veins and arteries, not come out of the veins and arteries to the dry space that's supposed to be a dry space around the cell. Okay? There's supposed to be a dry space around this cell. All right? Why? Well, for one, if there's not a dry space, that's what closes the gate. And once the gate is closed, the mitochondria starts losing energy, and the odds go through the roof that this cell will manifest a disease gene over here that never would have manifested any other way, according to Dr. Bruce Lipton from Stanford University Medical School, and wonderful research he did there. Okay? But as long as the gate is open, there's sodium ions. Na plus is sodium. Ion is sort of a thing that produces energy. And potassium ions, K plus. And the sodium and potassium ions are supposed to go in and out of the cell. But they only do that if there's a dry state around the cell. If it's wet from blood plasma liquid being pushed out of the cell, because the lining of the cell is permeable if enough force, that's blood pressure. If they come out of the cell and get over here, it closes the gate and the sodium and potassium ions can't get into the cell. Now, if the blood plasma protein liquid is not around the cell and stays in the arteries, then the sodium and potassium go in and out. The sodium is supposed to stay low. The potassium is supposed to stay high. And they both go in and out. And when they go in and out, it creates an electrical field around the cell. Every cell is electrical, okay? And that's what creates the electrical field. And then as part of that, the potassium ion goes in and binds to the mitochondria, and that's what causes it to wiggle. So as long as there's a dry state and the sodium and potassium go in and out, create the electric current and electrify the cell, and then the potassium binds to the mitochondria and causes it to produce energy, which keeps the cell healthy, working, reproducing, staying open, taking in nutrients, getting rid of waste, all of the above. All right. And everything's great. And the disease gene never manifests. Never. Not if the cell's healthy. A disease gene only manifests if the cell becomes unhealthy and is about to die. So let's talk about what that does real quick. If the blood plasma protein liquid is pushed out of the cell, out of the arteries, veins, and capillaries into the dry state, then the gate closes on the cell and the electrical activity of the cell gets lower and lower and lower, and the potassium ions can't get in, can't bind to the mitochondria because they can't get into the cell because the gate's closed, all right? So the mitochondria starts wiggling less and less. And when the mitochondria is about out of energy and the and the electricity of the cell has gone way down, that is when a disease gene may very well manifest that would not have manifested if the cell was not stressed. If this gate was open, that disease gene will not manifest. If it's closed and enough time goes by where the cell's about to die, that's when the disease gene manifests. Okay? So what causes the blood plasma protein liquid to be pushed out of the veins, arteries, and capillaries into the dry state? It's called trapped plasma proteins, but it's a liquid. What causes that? Stress. Stress. Okay? And this should start making more sense if you've watched the number one cause of all health problems, where we talk a little more about that, all right? But it's stress. Now, it can be physical stress if you eat a lot of salt or a lot of fatty foods and things that aren't good for you. That stresses the body, raises your blood pressure, and when the blood pressure raises, it pushes the plasma proteins out into the dry state. Now, the thing about that is digestion takes 2 to 3 hours, takes more energy than anything else the body does, okay? So in 2 or 3 hours, even if you have eaten a bad meal, the gate opens again because the plasma proteins go back into the arteries, capillaries, and veins. That causes the gate to open. The sodium and potassium start going in, create an electrical current and electrical cell, and the potassium again starts binding with the mitochondria, which now starts up again. And even if a disease gene manifests, the chances are really good that it will heal. It will remask and not create the symptoms that you experience as disease or illness. So that's the physical part. If you eat something, of course, if your circumstances are really stressful, like you're in a life-threatening situation, you're supposed to go into fight or flight. Your cells will close, the plasma proteins will go into the dry state, but once the emergency's over, 20 minutes later, the gate opens up again, the potassium binds to the mitochondria, it starts doing what it's supposed to do, and you're fine, and the cell's fine, and it never manifested a disease gene, okay? But, what if the stress is not anything you ate or anything in your physical circumstances? It's in your memory banks. It's here. The other database that this cell has access to. Well, if there's unresolved trauma, and I saw a wonderful new research article not long ago. I think it might have been Jordan Peterson. I'm not sure about that. I need to check it. But anyway, the title of the article was, and I've never seen this title before, Unresolved Trauma is the Reason. And then the article went on to explain that on virtually any health problem you can ever have, the cause or source of that is unresolved trauma in your memories, okay? And so if you have unresolved trauma in your memories, and that is what is creating the stress and causing the plasma proteins to come into the dry state, closing the gate, and the mitochondria and energy of the cell start going down and down and down, that doesn't end in 2 or 3 hours like digestion. That doesn't end in 20 minutes at like the life-threatening emergency. That can be 24/7 for as long as that memory or trauma is not resolved and in resonating the stress signal to your brain, which then kicks you into fight or flight. Okay? So if you resolve the memories that when you think about them have anger in them, fear, hatred, I'm not good enough, I don't measure up, nothing ever works out for me, the worst things that have happened to you in your life and you've never gone back to get resolution with them, okay, then chances are if you've got one or two or more of those, and most of us do, you've got plasma proteins in your dry state. Your gate to your cells is closed or closed too much of the time. Your cell and the mitochondria are losing energy. And if you don't get out of this before it gets too close, to the cell gets close to death, the odds are it's going to manifest diabetes, cancer, heart disease, a disease or sickness that you never would have had any other way. In fact, according to Dr. Lipton at Stanford, anyone who's ever had an illness or disease, that's where it came from. Stress that flooded your dry state, closed the gates on your cells, and the energy on them has gone down until a disease gene has manifested, and now you've got diabetes or cancer or depression or anxiety or whatever. Although in this one we're talking about physical disease. So that's where it comes from, and we've been helping people with this issue for about 25 years. If you'll click on the link at the bottom of the page, we're giving you a free sample fix that you can start doing. Probably take you 5 minutes to learn how to do it, and then 5 minutes to do it. And you'll be on the way to these plasma proteins going back in the veins and arteries, those memories resolved, and it's not talk therapy, it does it automatically, okay? And we've got 26 double-blind studies to prove it, and 2 comparison studies that say it works better than the other things for these type of problems. You can read them for yourself right on our website. But if you'll click on the link, it'll take you to a free, completely free code you can do on your body that will find and heal the memories and cause the plasma proteins to go back into the veins and arteries, your gate to open, the electrical cell power to go up, the mitochondria to go up, and now even if you have the health problem, it starts to get better and better. All right? So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. That's probably like 6 hours of stuff into 30 minutes or 20 minutes or however long it was. So please share this with other people, because we need to know what's causing these problems so we can fix them. If we don't know where it's coming from, it's very difficult to fix. And most medications don't fix it. They work on the symptoms. About 80% of pharmaceutical medications are biological poisons. That's why they have all the disclaimers, and the disclaimers are longer than the rest of the TV commercial, okay? Because most of them are biological poisons, so when you take them, your body doesn't recognize them as something that should be in the body. It recognizes them as something that should not be in the body, a poison, and very often attacks them. And there's where you get all the side effects and everything, okay? But the solution I'm talking about has none of that. You can do it at home in your pajamas, and I'm willing to start you out completely for free. And you can be started in 30 minutes. So click the link, start fixing the #1 cause of your physical illness and disease. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day.